"Oh man, look here, look, down here." This is the ghost of Christmas Present speaking. From a book published 173 years ago, A Christmas Carol, 6,000 copies of the first edition, all the copies that were made, they sold in only 4 days. It would go on to transform the Christmas folks knew back then, notorious for its emphasis on drunkenness and licentiousness and hooliganism. Just imagine the worst of a Christmas office party, the worst of that, times 10. But that was then. Now, the holiday emphasizes family and goodwill and compassion. It is completely different now. In 1998, the Sunday Telegraph of London would call the author, Charles Dickens, no less than the man who invented Christmas. Let's get back to the story. "Oh man, look here. Look, down here." They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with the freshest tints, a stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacingly. Scrooge started back, appalled. Having them shown to him in this way, he tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. "Spirit, are they yours?" Scrooge could say no more. "They are man's," said the Spirit, looking down upon them. "And they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all, beware of this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it!" cried the Spirit, stretching out its hand towards the city. "Have they no refuge or resource?" cried Scrooge. "Are there no prisons?" said the Spirit, turning on him for the last time. His own words. "Are there no workhouses?" The bell struck 12. One of the incontrovertible lessons of A Christmas Carol is that children are so very vulnerable, so easily wounded. And the karma from these wounds are fierce. Instant karma, long-term karma. And sometimes the wounding comes from the economy. Dickens knew this directly. He was born to a middle-class life, but difficult times and his father's careless money management contributed to the family's financial ruin. His father landed in a debtor's prison, while the rest of the family moved in with him. Charles was left on his own, in the whole wide world, on his own. He was like Oliver Twist, fending for himself, working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in a boot polish factory with 1 hour for dinner and 30 minutes for tea, 12 years old. This was his life, so you better believe he could relate to the figures of want and of ignorance. Personally, he could feel them growing up in himself. And when his fate turned and he went on to live a rags to riches story, he never stopped thinking about those other boys and girls who stayed behind. He never stopped thinking about their state and their shriveled hands, their eyes, which devils glared out of menacingly upon their backs. The Industrial Revolution and its very few wealthy people were built, but how long would it last before want and ignorance would explode that edifice and everything would come tumbling down? That is certainly something I am wondering about, maybe you as well, in our own post-election times. But it's not just all about the economy. A Christmas Carol reminds us that you can be blessed with the silver spoon in your mouth and still things can go sour. Its protagonist, Ebenezer Scrooge, is the example. His father, we learn from the Ghost of Christmas Past, was cruel. It's implied that his mother was dead. He had been sent away from home to a boarding school, and that's where he'd be at Christmas time, all alone, and every other kid at home with family and with good cheer. Not him, though. For him, abandonment, loneliness, unworthiness. There's more that can be said about Scrooge's biography. That he was loved by characters like Fezziwig reminds us that his past was not completely sad, but it was sad enough that his inner child would be so deeply, deeply wounded. So his Scroogey, Grinchy, Mr. Potterish, see how the story stretches? His self, that self of his, it should be considered more as unprocessed hurt than as rational position. See the difference? Listen to what happens when two charity workers invite Scrooge to give. At this festive time of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at this time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses, demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? Both very busy, sir. Those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Listen to his abandoned child's voice that has become so hardened and so bitter that one who himself suffered could be so cruel to others. Listen, that's striking. But it's what happens when want and ignorance twist a person up, and logic cannot solve this. Healing has to take a different route. The argument of A Christmas Carol is that such a route has to have at least two dimensions, social and personal, and Christmas is the ideal time to begin. The social dimension is eloquently stated by the ghost of Jacob Marley, who returns from the grave full of regrets. Business, he cries out, wringing his hands. Business, mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. And then he says, at this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? People read this in 1843, and remember what they knew about Christmas back then. The worst of office parties times 10, right? But here was a voice that wanted to bring Christmas back to its Christian origins. It's about a blessed star. It's about wise men. It's about the family whom they visited. But notice above all that Dickens, as he speaks through Marley, says much more than that. he says that the star is always shining. He says that it is always leading folks who can give to those who need to receive. Veneration for the specific person of Jesus is not the point of Christmas. And it is definitely not the point of vital religion. The point of vital religion is to love one another. Jesus might inspire it, but so might the Buddha. So might Elizabeth Palmer Peabody. Christmas is a story that lays love out purely. So let us live in that spirit of Christmas all year long. It's not about crazy office partying. The message gets repeated again and again throughout the book. Here's Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who says, "But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable time, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys." And you guys are smiling at me, and not because of what I'm saying. What's happening? Tell me what's happening. Huh? It was the sound? It's the ghost. It's Jacob Marley. Chains. So, as a side note, you see my colleague Don Milton racing around? He's making it better. So, I think it was like about 9 years ago when I was preaching about this story about Alegba, who's this great trickster figure, right? From I think Africa-Yoruban tradition or something like that. Great story. And so I'm getting into it, and Alegba, he's awesome. And people are like looking kind of right behind me, kind of right there, and they're going like this. I'm holding forth. I found out later it was a cockroach. Yeah. So that's the ghost of Christmas. What? I don't know what that is. Well, it's actually kind of funny because that was so perfectly tricksterish, right? So perfectly. All right. The big thing here is just this wonderful thing that Fred's got to say about Christmas. That wonderful passage when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. We are fellow passengers to the grave. You know, sometimes we are the wise men led to the star, and sometimes we are the refugee family who just had a baby, and we see holiness in that new life, and we are completely vulnerable and afraid, and our need is overwhelming. Sometimes we are the one, other times we're the other, but always we are fellow passengers. Come Christmas time, says Dickens, let's think on that. We need a Christmas time revolution in our nation right now, do we not? But this is not the full picture for Charles Dickens. Did you know that in 2008, Forbes, the magazine Forbes, it included Scrooge in its list of the top 15 richest fictional characters, and it estimated his net worth to be $8 billion. Well, what that means is he could have immediately and substantially improve the lives of pretty much everyone around him without making a dent in his fortune. He could have done that. Yet there he is, approached by two charity workers asking for a small donation, and he's having none of it. He's not going to budge. But why? And this takes us to the personal dimension of the route to undoing the damage of want and ignorance. They twist up our souls. How do we get untwisted? And here is where a Christmas carol lines out nothing less than a complete spiritual discipline, or what a Christmas time revolution for the soul would look like. Read the book again. Watch the movie again. What you will see unfolding in the soul of Scrooge is this. Number one, Scrooge experiences undeserved kindness. Undeserved kindness from the ghost of Jacob Marley. And this is when Scrooge's heart starts to soften. It means that when you are generous enough to show kindness to someone who does not deserve it, the gift you are giving is profound, and it may be the start of their changed life. Number two, Scrooge encounters the ghost from Christmas past, and he reconnects with the child that he was. He feels those feelings again, and he needs to. You know, he does not need an encounter with Christ. He needs an encounter with himself. Did you hear me? Yes. Not that an encounter with Christ is a bad thing. But I'm strong about that because I can remember years in my own life when I was trying to encounter Christ and I needed to encounter myself. He needs to encounter himself. And it leads to a further softening of his heart. It means that you cannot think your way to healing, people. You cannot do that. You cannot study Plato and Kant and get to kindness. That's not how it happens, Unitarian Universalists. Number three, Scrooge meets the ghost from Christmas present. And what happens is his awareness of his world is expanded. He discovers someone named Tiny Tim, and he is amazed by the deep love that erupts for this sweet child. In other words, healing requires you and me to see beyond our own lives into the lives of others, folks we usually never connect with. With whom are you in relationship? Said somebody important in this pulpit a couple weeks ago. With whom are you in relationship? What Tiny Tims are out there, but you have not connected with them yet. You don't even know they exist, but they're out there. Your heart will explode when you see them. Number four, then comes the ghost from Christmas future. And here we remember we will die. And here we acknowledge that our name will be held in the mouths of other people, and our deeds will be told by other people. So what will our legacy be? What will people say about you? What will people say about me? Number five, and then comes Christmas morning. Listen. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them. For he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should have their wrinkle up their eyes and grins and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. In other words, don't let anybody trap you by their small vision. Don't let anybody freeze you in time. If a Christmas revolution happens in your heart, then you just be you. You do you. Others may laugh. Others may doubt. But you let the truth of your life be quite enough for you. Listen to what this book says. Listen to its two main lessons. Number one, exclusive veneration for the specific person of Jesus is not the point of Christmas, and it is definitely not the point of vital religion. The point of vital religion is to love one another. Number two, people like Scrooge exist, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Radical transformation is possible. Love people, even when undeserved. Remember the child you were and still are and will always be. I don't care how old you are. The child exists. Feel all the feelings, therefore. Expand your world and relations. Know you will die, and so live all the time more urgently. Do not let others freeze you in time. All of this is from the man who invented Christmas. This is from a person who knew want and ignorance directly, and his life was lived in service to healing. This is also from a Unitarian. When Dickens wrote this book, he was a faithful member of Little Portland Street's Unitarian Chapel. He once said that Unitarianism, I'm quoting him, is a religion which has sympathy for men of every creed and ventures to pass judgment on none, who would do something for human improvement if and when it could, and would always practice charity and toleration. Fellow writer Robert Browning said, Mr. Dickens is an enlightened Unitarian. The final lesson of A Christmas Carol is that our faith has real, enduring power. Christmas, as we know it today, comes from it. It urges a Christmas revolution in society. It urges a Christmas revolution in each of our souls. Maybe we don't have any famous cathedrals that we built, but we built this. We built a Christmas carol. Despite the pain of this time, when want and ignorance worry the land, worry our children, I am so grateful for Unitarian Universalism, and I know it will carry us through. There is a blessed star, and it will lead us. Amen.